I was standing in the Shoppers Drug Mart on Bloor Street, holding a bottle of moisturizer I didn't need yet and reading a caption I couldn't believe had actually been posted publicly, when I made the decision that ended my ex-husband's carefully constructed life in Toronto. His new girlfriend had uploaded a photo to Instagram. She was in a spin class, all fluorescent lighting and fresh highlights, tagged at some boutique studio in Yorkville. The caption read, "So grateful for a man who loves a woman who actually invests in herself. Some people let themselves go and then wonder why things fall apart. Not me." She tagged my ex-husband's construction company in the post. She tagged his business account. She tagged herself at his condo. 42 people had liked it already, including his mother, his site manager, and 3 subcontractors I had personally vetted and signed contracts with while we were still married. I could have replied with everything I had. I had plenty. Instead, I put the moisturizer back on the shelf, took a screenshot, and sent a single text to my former sister-in-law that said only, "Did you see it?" She called me before I reached the door. She'd seen it. She'd actually been waiting for it. We both knew something like this was coming, had known it for months, the same way you know a pipe is going to burst before it does. You can feel the pressure building behind the walls. She laughed the way people laugh when something is both funny and deeply satisfying, and said, "The valuation report came back last week. The Vaughan contract pushed them over. The clause is live." I walked out into the October cold and said, "Then I'm filing Monday." Let me back up. My ex-husband's family had been in residential construction in the Greater Toronto area for 2 generations. His father had started the company in the late 80s, 2-man operation out of a pickup truck, slowly building a reputation for quality work in Etobicoke and Mississauga. By the time I met my ex-husband, the company had 12 employees, a small commercial portfolio, and a genuinely strong name in a very competitive market. It also had the operational structure of a company still run out of a pickup truck. Paper timesheets that got lost. Subcontractor invoices tracked in a binder his father kept in the glove compartment. Project budgets that existed only in his father's head. Holdback schedules, the mandatory 10% retained on every Ontario construction contract until substantial completion, tracked so loosely that they'd once missed a release date by 4 months and left a subcontractor, threatening litigation. The company made money because my ex-husband's father was a genuinely skilled builder who'd earned loyalty over 30 years. It was surviving in spite of itself. I am a financial analyst. Was, when we got married, working at a mid-size firm downtown that I'd been with for 4 years. I understood construction finance specifically because I'd done a sector rotation early in my career that included a detailed file on a major GTA developer. When I saw what my ex-husband's family business was actually doing with its money, I couldn't look away from it the way you can't look away from a structural problem in a house you love. So I helped. I built them a project tracking system in Excel first, then transitioned them to actual construction management software once I'd mapped their workflow. I restructured the holdback tracking so they never missed a release again. I set up a proper subcontractor management process with standardized CC/DC contracts, payment certificates, and a documentation system that would hold up to any audit. I renegotiated 3 supplier accounts and brought material costs down enough that his father cried at the kitchen table and said he wished he'd met me 20 years earlier. My ex-husband told people his wife helped out with some of the admin. I did this while continuing to work full-time downtown. I did it on evenings, on weekends, on the rare vacation days I took that were not actually vacations. I did it because I believed in the company, because I loved his father, because I thought I was building something that belonged to both of us. His sister, who had a finance degree from Western and understood exactly what I was doing, would sometimes sit with me at the dining room table while I worked and say, quietly, that she'd never seen anyone give so much without being compensated. I would tell her family was different. She'd nod in a way that meant she didn't agree. My ex-husband hired his girlfriend as a project coordinator 18 months before our marriage ended. She was 27. She'd done some social media work for a home renovation account and presented herself as having marketing expertise. He introduced her to his father as someone who could help them build their online presence. Within 3 months she was running their Instagram, their Google profile, and their client communication templates. Within 6 months she was coming to site walkthroughs that I used to attend. Within 9 months my ex-husband moved out of our house in Leaside and told me he needed to figure some things out. I found out from his sister that he'd already signed a lease with his girlfriend on a condo in Liberty Village. The divorce took 14 months. His father tried to mediate twice. His lawyer was aggressive about the asset split and completely uninterested in the non-financial contributions I'd made to the company. My lawyer, a woman named Patricia who had been doing family law in Ontario for 22 years and had seen every version of this story, told me on our second meeting that trying to claim direct compensation for unpaid labor to a family business was difficult but not impossible, and that the smarter play was a contingency clause tied to future company performance. She'd looked at a pitch document my ex-husband had left open on his laptop during one of the reconciliation attempts. His father had insisted on a proposal for a large residential development contract in Vaughan, the kind that would represent a significant expansion for a company their size. If they won it, the company's valuation would climb substantially. She built a clause into the divorce settlement accordingly. In the event that the company's assessed valuation increased by more than 25% within 48 months of the divorce being finalized, I was entitled to a payment reflecting my documented contribution to that growth, specifically 12% of the incremental value above the threshold calculated by an independent chartered business valuator, with full rights to request a forensic audit of company financials to verify the valuation. His lawyer barely read it. They were focused on keeping me away from the property equity and the investment accounts. They thought the company would stay the size it was. They didn't know about the Vaughan contract the way Patricia knew about it. The divorce was finalized in March. By August of the following year, the company had won the Vaughan development, hired 20 additional workers, taken on 2 more projects, and expanded into a new commercial vertical. His girlfriend was now listed on the company website as Director of Marketing and Brand Strategy. She posted 3 times a week about the company's growth, about her vision for their rebrand, about her role in taking them to the next level. She was also, as it turned out, stealing from them, but I didn't know that yet when I filed the valuation claim on that Monday morning in October. What I knew was that the company had grown. My former sister-in-law had quietly confirmed it. My filing triggered the mandatory independent valuation process, which triggered the audit rights under my settlement clause, which meant a chartered professional accountant was going to have full access to the company's financial records within the week. My ex-husband received the notice on Tuesday. He called me twice. I didn't answer. His father called once and left a voicemail asking me to be reasonable. I saved it without replying. His girlfriend sent me a direct message on Instagram that said I was pathetic and that trying to write off his success after years of dragging him down said everything about who I was. I forwarded it to Patricia with a note that said, "She's acknowledging awareness of the company's financial position. Thought you should have this." Patricia responded, "Perfect. If the audit finds anything, this becomes very useful." The valuator was a quiet man named Gerald who worked out of a Mississauga office and had clearly done this hundreds of times. He met with me and Patricia in mid-October, spread his preliminary findings across the conference room table, and confirmed that the company's valuation had increased by 31% from the baseline established in my settlement, well above the 25% threshold. I was entitled to a payment. That part was straightforward. The part that wasn't straightforward he explained with the careful language of someone trained not to make accusations before evidence is complete. "Some of the numbers aren't reconciling the way they should," he said. "Construction companies have complex financials, lots of project-based revenue, multiple subcontractor flows, HST implications that can obscure things temporarily." But some of what he was seeing didn't look like complexity. It looked like something else. He needed more time. He got 3 more weeks. When he came back, he brought a second person, a forensic accountant who'd worked with the RCMP's financial crime unit before going private. She had the effect of someone who found fraud slightly boring at this point. She'd seen so much of it, and she laid out what she'd found with the efficiency of someone reading a grocery list. Fake subcontractor accounts. 11 of them, registered in Ontario as sole proprietorships, with CRA business numbers that had been obtained legitimately but corresponded to companies that performed no actual work. Invoices submitted to the company for project management, consulting, site coordination services, and marketing support, all approved, all paid through the accounts payable system, all flowing into bank accounts that the forensic accountant had traced to a single individual, the Director of Marketing and Brand Strategy. His girlfriend had been running the scheme for approximately 14 months. It started small, a few invoices. Here and there, a few $1,000s, easy to miss in the noise of a growing construction company's financials. It escalated significantly once the Vaughan contract came through and the cash flow increased. In total, she had redirected approximately $193,000 in company funds into her personal accounts through the fake vendor system. She had also, separately, been misrepresenting the company's profit margins in the reports she prepared for his father's review, inflating revenue recognition on certain projects to make the company look more profitable than it was, which had supported the case for expansion that his father might otherwise have questioned. The Vaughn contract had been leveraged partly on the basis of financial projections she had contributed to, projections that were not accurate. The company was performing well on actual operations, but it was also carrying more exposure than his father knew, because the numbers he'd been reviewing had been managed. Patricia called me the morning after Gerald and the forensic accountant delivered their findings. She said, "This is no longer just a settlement enforcement matter. This is a criminal matter and a civil matter and a very significant mess. His father needs to call an emergency shareholders meeting. You have the right to be there given the settlement clause. I suggest you are." His father's company operated with a small shareholder structure: my ex-husband's father, my ex-husband, his sister, and a minority stakeholder who was a longtime family friend. 4 votes on any major resolution. Patricia and Gerald attended the meeting as my representatives. The forensic accountant came to present findings. I wore the charcoal blazer I'd bought the previous spring when I'd started interviewing at consulting firms. I walked into the boardroom at the company's main office in Etobicoke, the one I had helped set up, where the filing system I'd built was still in use, and I sat down. My ex-husband was already there. He looked like he hadn't slept in several days. His father sat at the head of the table with the expression of a man who has spent his whole life building something and is only now considering what it might cost him. His sister was across from my ex-husband with her laptop open and a stack of printed pages beside her. She glanced at me when I came in with the particular look of someone trying very hard not to look relieved. His girlfriend sat behind my ex-husband, not at the table. No formal role in the shareholders' meeting. But present. His father called the meeting to order and said he wanted to get through this quickly and professionally, that the company's interests had to come first, and that he hoped everyone in the room understood the seriousness of what they were gathered to discuss. Gerald presented the valuation findings first. The 31% growth, the threshold, my entitlement under the settlement clause. My ex-husband's father nodded. That part he'd already known was coming. Then the forensic accountant opened her folder. She walked through the fake vendor accounts with the same energy she'd have used explaining a tax filing process. 11 entities. CRA registration numbers. HST numbers that had been obtained and then used on fraudulent invoices. 14 months of payments. $193,000 in total. She named the bank accounts. She named the account holder. His girlfriend stood up before the forensic accountant finished the sentence. She said it was fabricated. She said I had orchestrated this whole thing because I couldn't accept that he'd moved on. She said the vendor accounts were legitimate and that she could pull the contracts right now, that this was an obvious setup by a bitter ex-wife who couldn't stand watching someone else thrive. The forensic accountant did not look up from her folder. She said, 2 of the vendor registrations were filed using a personal email address that belongs to you. The HST remittances on those accounts were never filed with CRA, which means the company paid HST on invoices that was never remitted. That's an additional liability the company now carries. The bank accounts receiving the funds are held in your name at 2 different institutions. I have the records. His girlfriend's voice changed. The certainty drained out of it the way color drains from someone who's just heard something they weren't prepared for. His ex-husband looked at her. He said her name. Just her name. The way people say a name when what they actually mean is, "Tell me this isn't what it looks like." She didn't say anything. His sister spoke for the first time. She said, "Dad, I've been doing my own internal review over the past 3 weeks. I have written complaints from 9 employees about discrepancies in their project bonuses. They were told the bonuses were reduced because of the cash flow demands of the Vaughn expansion. I also have 3 subcontractors who flagged payment delays on legitimate invoices, delays that line up exactly with the periods when the fraudulent invoices were being paid instead." His father said, "How bad is the exposure overall?" Gerald said, "Between the fraudulent vendor payments, the HST liability, and the project finance gaps from the misrepresented margins, the company is looking at approximately $340,000 in total exposure. That doesn't include the settlement payment owed to your former daughter-in-law." His father was quiet for a long time. He's a man who built everything he has by understanding exactly what something costs before he commits to it. I watched him do that calculation. I watched him arrive at the answer. He looked at his son and said, "You gave her access to the accounts." My ex-husband said he'd trusted her to manage the marketing budget. He'd reviewed high-level reports but not the underlying transactions. He hadn't known. He would never have allowed this. He kept saying he hadn't known, the way people repeat something when they're trying to believe it themselves. His father said, "You didn't know because you didn't want to know. You brought someone into this company because of a personal decision and you gave her authority you didn't verify and you didn't supervise because it was inconvenient to apply the same standards to her that we apply to everyone else." Then he looked at me. He said, "You knew." I said, "I suspected the financials weren't clean. The growth numbers looked inconsistent with what I knew about the operational costs." The audit confirmed it. He said, "And you waited until you had grounds to force an audit." I said, "I waited until I had legal standing to request one, yes." He was quiet again. Then he said something I hadn't expected. He said, "I should have paid you. All those years, I knew what you were doing and I called it helping out and I let Derek take credit because it was easier. I'm not going to pretend that wasn't wrong." The room was very still. Patricia spoke. She told his father he had 3 options. Report the fraud to the appropriate authorities given the HST component. That meant both local police and CRA. Attempt to manage it internally, which given the paper trail and the number of people now aware of it, was unlikely to stay contained and carried its own legal risk. Or settle my claim in full immediately, compensate the affected employees and subcontractors, and let me determine whether to file a separate complaint. His girlfriend said, "That's coercion." Patricia said, "The fraud is documented. The question is what your family does about it." His father asked everyone who wasn't family or legal counsel to step out. His girlfriend started to protest. His ex-husband told her very quietly to please go wait in the hall. I waited in the hallway with Gerald and the forensic accountant for 40 minutes. His sister came out after 10, sat down beside me and said, "Dad's going to do the right thing. He always does eventually. It just takes him a while to get there." We went back in. His father informed the group that the board had voted to terminate his girlfriend's employment effective immediately, to initiate full cooperation with CRA on the HST matter, to file a report with Toronto Police regarding the fraud, and to fund the settlement payment and the employee and subcontractor restitution from the family trust his father had maintained separately from the company, his personal savings, essentially, accumulated over 40 years. He looked at me and said, "Your settlement will be paid in full within 45 days. The employees will be made whole within 30. I would ask you to allow us to manage the criminal reporting directly rather than having you file separately." I said, "I'll allow that for the company-level fraud. But CRA is going to do its own investigation once the HST discrepancies are flagged, and I can't control what they find." He nodded. He knew. I filed my own report with CRA 3 days later. Not to cause trouble but because I had a legal and ethical obligation now that I was aware of unremitted HST collected in my former company's name. CRA moved quickly. They usually do when there's documentary evidence this clean. His girlfriend was charged 8 weeks later. Fraud over $5,000 under the criminal code, the base charge plus additional counts related to the false business registrations and the HST fraud. She had a preliminary hearing in February. She eventually pleaded guilty to the fraud charges in exchange for a sentencing recommendation, received a conditional sentence of 2 years less a day served in the community, was ordered to pay full restitution, and was prohibited from holding any position with signing authority over company accounts for 10 years. My ex-husband was not criminally charged. The investigation determined he hadn't initiated the scheme, and there was insufficient evidence to establish he'd known about it. The civil exposure was a different matter. 3 of the subcontractors who'd experienced payment delays retained their own lawyers and named him in civil claims alongside the company. His father settled those quietly. The Vaughan project was completed under new site management his father brought in. The company survived, smaller than it had been at its peak ambition but stable. His sister was named operations director. She has a finance degree and 20 years of understanding how the business actually works. She is doing well. My ex-husband left the company voluntarily. Or was asked to. I was never told exactly which, and it didn't matter. Last I heard he was working for a larger firm in the project management division, salaried, no ownership stake, no signing authority. His father sold 40% of the company to a private equity partner in the spring and used part of the proceeds to fund his eventual retirement. He called me once, about 6 months after everything had settled. He said he wanted me to know that he understood now what I'd given to the business and that he was sorry it had taken losing it to understand the cost. I thanked him for saying it. I meant it. My settlement payment arrived in certified funds 41 days after the board meeting. $218,000 in Canadian dollars, reflecting the 12% of incremental valuation above the threshold, confirmed by independent assessment and verified by Gerald's audit. It was the most money I had ever received at once and also the clearest proof I'd ever had that those years of evenings and weekends had been worth something concrete, not just to my sense of self-worth but on paper, in numbers, in a certified payment that cleared my account on a Tuesday afternoon while I was eating lunch at my desk. I took 2 days off work. I drove to Muskoka and rented a small cottage for a long weekend in November, which is not when anyone rents cottages in Muskoka, and I sat on the dock wrapped in a blanket and looked at the lake going gray in the late fall light and thought about what I actually wanted to do next. I had been, since the divorce, working as a financial analyst at a consulting firm. Stable work, good colleagues, not what I wanted to do for the rest of my career. I had been thinking for a year about starting my own practice, specifically in financial systems and operational finance for small and medium construction and trade companies, a niche I understood from the inside. Having lived it, the settlement gave me the runway to do it without the risk that had been holding me back. I registered the business in January. Set up the office in a small commercial space in the East End I'd had my eye on. Built the client intake process and the service offering and the contracts from scratch, the right way, the way I'd built everything else. Spent the first 3 months doing exactly what Patricia had told me I was good at, taking a chaotic financial operation and making it functional. My former sister-in-law sent me a referral within the first month. A roofing company in Scarborough that was growing faster than their systems could handle. Then a plumbing contractor in Hamilton whose holdback tracking was nearly identical to how her family's company had operated in the 90s. Word spread the way it does in trade industries when someone actually understands the business through job sites and supplier relationships and the particular informal network of people who've worked together across many projects over many years. The practice is busy now. I have 2 associates and a wait list. My former sister-in-law comes to lunch occasionally. She's been good for the company. Better than anyone gave her credit for a long time. Last month she told me that her father had asked about me, that he'd said he hoped I was doing well. I said I was. I meant that too. The Instagram post has been deleted. The account that posted it is private now. It was private within 6 hours of the comment I'd left on it, which was the 3 words that triggered everything. Love your energy. Friendly enough that she'd thought nothing of it. Specific enough that I had documentation of her public declaration of involvement in company activities, time-stamped and saved, which became part of the evidentiary record establishing her role when it mattered. 3 words. Public enough to be documented. Vague enough to be dismissed. Specific enough to do exactly what I needed. His girlfriend had thought the comment was approval. She thought I was irrelevant, that I'd been left behind, that the life she'd stepped into was sealed and finished and entirely hers to display. She'd thought the woman in the grocery store aisle was nothing to worry about. She was wrong about what kind of woman I am. A lot of people are, at first. Quiet doesn't mean finished. Careful doesn't mean afraid. And documentation always matters. The people who mock you for keeping records never think about the moment when records become the only thing between them and everything they built on a foundation they never checked. I check everything. It's how I'm built. It's also, as it turned out, exactly what I needed to be. The practice has a second client intake meeting tomorrow morning. A mechanical contractor out of Brampton, 3rd-generation family business, trying to figure out why their margins keep compressing despite growing revenue. I've already reviewed their preliminary financials. I have some ideas. I'm looking forward to it. If this story made you feel something, if you recognized that quiet determination, that long patience, that moment when careful preparation finally meets its moment, hit the like button and subscribe. There are more stories like this one. Stories about people who kept their records, built their clauses, and waited for exactly the right time to check the books. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is say almost nothing, and mean everything by it.